Phil Steele Plus tour with selections for November the 5th. Very solid week last week, 6-2 for the selections. Hope you enjoyed that. And we were able to survive despite giving up the bad beat of the year with Florida State plus 9.5 over Clemson. I'm sure you all saw it. The dreaded lateral fumble play, throwing the football backwards 20 yards, no time left on the clock. A defensive lineman rumbles into the end zone, falls into the end zone, I should say, with a touchdown. The referees don't even know whether to award the touchdown. About 3 minutes after the game's over, they officially award the touchdown, and Florida State plus 9.5 loses by 10. One of the two losses last week for the Phil Steele Plus tour, an outstanding 6-2 week. Let's hope we do that again for you this week. Put a lot of work and effort into these each and every week. Of course, the purpose of this is to show you what all is available on the Phil Steele Plus when you get that, but also give you some free selections. And as I mentioned last week, I've got a special offer just for you guys that take the time to watch the Phil Steele, take the Phil Steele Plus tour each week. I've got a big-time discount for you on my Inside the Press Box newsletter. And Inside the Press Box is all about the write-ups, the computer forecasts, everything that's in there. The selections, I mean, you get a selection on every game. I give you a score forecast on every single game. I do end up choosing 5 or 6 at the end of the week as best bets. They did go 6-0 last week. They're on a nice hot streak, but that's not what that newsletter is about either. Naturally, wins are important, but it's about the information that you get. So let's get into it here. We're going to start off, and you guys probably knew this was coming, option versus option. You've heard it here on the Phil Steele Plus tour many times. We've used Army and Army Navy to go under the total. If we click on that one, Army and Navy under the total. Look at this. Todd put the over-unders in this year. In years past, I used to have to go down here and tell you line and all that, but here it is right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 straight years I've given out the play under in Army Navy. Every year it comes through like magic, and the reason is this. Option is a difficult defense to defend. When you play the option, you have basically 1 week. You do not have the players in practice that know how to work the option efficiently, like Army, Navy, and Air Force run the option. The cut blocking, it's a very tough thing to prepare for. However, Army, Navy, and Air Force have great scout teams, their own offenses, because they practice against the option. So they know the option inside and out. They'll know the inner workings of the option. And let's take a look at this game, Air Force and Army. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight unders. As you can see, the majority of them are unders whenever these two match up. So 7 straight unders, the Army Air Force game. Even last night I was watching the Georgia State Georgia Southern game, Georgia State and Louisiana game. And they were talking about how Georgia State has incorporated the option into their offense. And then I thought about, Georgia State just played Georgia Southern 2 weeks ago, and look at that final score, 21-14. A couple of teams that are working on the option. So when option plays option, I like the under. Now, Army, if you look at them a little bit closer, it's not just a pure play on that. Army's defense has given up some points, 70 to Wake Forest, 35 to Western Kentucky. And Ball State, they gave up 28 points to. Now, the common denominator there is those teams all have passing attacks. Western Kentucky threw for 435, Wake Forest for 458, and Ball State for 233. Army does best when they're taking on a run team. Even Wisconsin, a pure run team, that game was 20-14 and only, 20-14 because of a couple of late scores in that game. If you go back and take a look, in the fourth quarter, 2 minutes to go, it's 13-7. There's 20 points in that game. Wisconsin got a touchdown. Army actually hit a big pass to get down the field, and he scores a touchdown with 38 seconds left. So 34 could easily have been less than that. And I mentioned the passing. Air Force has, at times, incorporated the pass a little bit in their offense. Not this year. Once again, the beautiful thing about Phil Steele Plus, it puts everything in green and red. I'd like to do green and red in the magazine. It just doesn't work as well because you can't see it as clearly as you see it here on Phil Steele Plus. The red means a poor passing performance, and as you could tell, only once all year have they thrown above 110 yards, and that was against Utah State in a game that was a shootout. But here is their passing totals for the year. They're hitting 43%, 78 yards per game. So it's run team versus run team. You could see Air Forces, Air Armies. And another reason that option versus option goes under the total is the fact that both teams are running the football. That clock never stops. It just keeps on running. You'll get 12, 15-minute drives that eat up the clock. So you got a lot of run, shrinking the clock. The series, both teams know the defenses, and both teams have solid defenses. Look at this. Army holding their opponents to 72 yards per game below the season average. Now, these stats are in the magazine. You know these stats, but if you don't, this means that Army, now the Wake Forest game was the one that was out of the park because Wake was just throwing the ball, taking advantage of some big wide receivers working against their less athletic and shorter cornerbacks. But the rest of the games, they held Georgia State to a season low. That's what the number 1 means. They held Miami of Ohio to a season low. Second season low here, and this is the yards below their average. So if they held Ball State 75 yards per game below their season average, that means if you go over here and take a look at Ball State, which got 269 yards, that in games other than Army, they're averaging 344 yards per game. But against Army, it was 269, so it's 75. We take the Army game out and do it against all the other games, which really helps. So it's not against their season average, because that would include the Army game. It includes all the other games except for Army, 75 below their season average. Miami of Ohio, 179. Good defense. Same thing here with Air Force. And once again, their one bad game, look at this red here. Passing team, 448 yards, 49 points. Other than that, they've given up 14, 3, 7, 10, 14, 17, 20. Yeah, the numbers keep getting lower and lower on these games because Vegas realizes the unders are almost automatic, but we're going to keep playing them. Let's go under 37.5 in the Air Force Army game as your first selection here on the Phil Steele Plus Tour. All right, we take you from that game to a nighttime game. Nevada is hosting San Jose State. These are the team pages. You have them on every page. You have them also on all the FCS teams. There they are by conference. If you know your FCS conferences, God bless you. I still don't know all my FCS conferences. If you told me the teams, I could probably tell you half of them were at a conference, and they're changing. A lot of them are switching conferences. So here's alphabetical order, which makes it even better. And then, of course, we got the NFL team pages as well. But we're going to put Nevada on the right, and we are going to put San Jose on the left for our second play here today. Nevada on the right, and let's get San Jose and click them on the left. And can you imagine doing it? Any game you're wondering about, you become an instant expert on every game. This also gives you individual player stats. You can go back and see who's thrown for what in every game, who the top running back has been in every game. Look at this. Tawa's only had 200-yard games. That means he's itching for a breakout game this year. But Carson Strong is a guy who's got this great receiving core with Dobbs and Turner and Stovall and Lockhart and Horton. So they tend to throw the football quite a bit this year. But let's take a look at a couple of things. Now, another. I've showed you the individual stats. I could show you the last 40 years leaders, but we'll wait till we get to an FBS versus FBS team for that. When you come down here, you can click on the box score, and it gives you the complete box score for each game. So let's go take a look at last year. Oh, by the way, right here is your halftime scores. So as you could tell at a glance, Nevada led San Jose 20-7 at the half last year, had a 276 to 195 yard edge. That game was pretty much going to go Nevada's way. Nevada's going to win the Mountain West Conference. It was a huge game. This is why I call it legitimate revenge. Click on the box score. It tells you what happened. Now, once again, I don't do these box scores. CollegePressBox.com does. And thank you, Ted Ganji. Thank you, CollegePressBox.com, for allowing me to post these box scores on my site. I actually go through every box score of every game, every play-by-play of every game, every week. Yeah, that's what I do. But you take a look at this. We could take a look. It gives you the box score. It gives you who did what in the game as far as the players, tackles for the game, who was the starters, participation chart, drive chart, and then the play-by-play. So I watched this game. Naturally, last year I got to watch almost every single game played all the way through because there was only like 30 games a week as opposed to the 60 that they have now. But it's pretty comfortable at the half. And then this happens. 98-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. All of a sudden, it's 20-14. Nevada gets down to the 1-yard line. Look at this. First and goal at the 4, second and goal at the 1, fumble. And San Jose goes right down and scores and gets a touchdown. San Jose eventually won the game. Tough break for Nevada. They wanted that badly. Now, San Jose State may have captured lightning in a bottle last year. Remember last year, during COVID, they captured what to do during COVID perfectly. They went 7-0, won the Mountain West Conference, did lose their bowl game. This year, it hasn't been quite the same. They lost at USC by 23. They lost to Western Michigan by 20. They even lost to Colorado State by 18, lost at home to San Diego State by 6. They have beaten some teams this year, Southern Utah, Hawaii, UNLV, and Wyoming, but not the caliber of Nevada. Let's take a little bit closer look at how they've done against passing teams. Western Michigan, they lost. Western Michigan can throw the football. USC can throw the football. 256 yards there. And, of course, New Mexico State can throw the football. New Mexico State threw for 300. They won that game but did not cover. So they struggle a little bit. They have my number 72 pass defense. Now, we have the pass efficiency defense in the magazine, but if you click here on the pages, you can go to FBS Info, and right here you've got the pass efficiency defense updated each week. Now, these are different than the NCAA because they take into account the strength of the opponent. If you just played Army, Air Force, and Georgia Southern in back-to-back-to-back weeks, you're going to have a great pass defense because they don't throw the ball. But this would account it for a mediocre pass defense because it takes into account that the opponent has weak pass offenses. Anyway, we go and look where San Jose State ranks here. And San Jose State has my number 72 pass defense, given 61%, 14 touchdowns this year, only 3 interceptions. So Nevada should be able to throw the football. That's a plus in their favor. Let's get Nevada back up there, put the team page, and go to Nevada. We're going to click on Nevada over here. Nevada, now this is in your magazine. Flip to your magazine page. Check out how Nevada does as a home favorite. 9-2. That's a pretty good record as a home favorite. Also, Nevada, let's take a look at how they do in home games. Look at this. At home, Nevada's plus 153 yards per game. On the road, they're only plus 5, so they're much better at home. Meanwhile, San Jose's plus 101 yards per game at home. Look what they are on the road, minus 87 yards per game. Their offense actually gains 102 yards below what their opponents allow when they go on the road. So they don't pack their offense on the road, and they're definitely a weaker team. So you have a strong home team against a weak road team. You have a Nevada team that's on a roll and done statistically well at home. They're 15-3 against the spread at home versus Mountain West under Norvell. Nevada is 8-1 ATS their last 9 home games against San Jose. How do I know that? Let's just click right here. When you click on the team, this gives you the history of the game, much like we did with Air Force and Army. Okay, let's look when San Jose travels here. Here they are at home. They win the game. Now, what this column does, this is the score of the game. What's the green and the red? Green means they won the game. Red means they lost the game. This column here is the spread on the game. Green means they covered the game. Red means they did not cover the game. And over here, by the way, is what the home team does in the game. If it's green out here, you can see the home team has covered. If the word win is here, that means the home team won the game straight up. So like here in 2018, we see loss, but it's colored green. How's that? They lost the game straight up. The home team did because Nevada won 21-12, but Nevada was a 14.5-point favorite, so the home team covered. So this tells you at a glance that the home team is covered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row. And this at a glance can show you that when Nevada hosts San Jose, we got to win, we got to win, we got to win, we got to win, 4-1, 5-1, 6-1, 7-1, 8-1. So this is at your fingertips. You can do the research yourself. But Nevada does well at home. Strong home team versus weak road team. Playing with legitimate revenge. I'm saying lay the 10.5 with Nevada over San Jose State. And that's if you want to stay up late. It starts at 10 o'clock p.m. Let's get to your next one here. It's Miami of Florida and Georgia Tech. And I got to tell you, I am impressed with Ryan Van Dyke. This guy is, 2 weeks ago, he made what I thought at the time were some ludicrous statements. He came out in his press conference and said they were about to take on NC State. They were an underdog at home against NC State. And he said, You know what? We put 40 points on him last year. Keep in mind, he wasn't even the quarterback last year. We put 40 points on him last year. Yeah, they're playing really good defense this year, but it's basically the same guys, so we're going to have success on them again this year. You're thinking bulletin board material. NC State's going to be so angry. Guess what? Miami of Florida won the game 31-30. He had 420 yards. Van Dyke, 25 of 33, 325. Now, last week, I used Miami as a best bet on the Inside the Press box, part of that 6-0 week. And Miami was plus the points at Pitt. They trailed briefly, 7-0. Other than that, they didn't trail the rest of the game. They won outright 38-34. Look at Van Dyke, 32 of 42 for 426. Let's look at the individual player stats. You can see at the start of the year, De'Ara King was the starter. He started the first 3 games, got injured. They used both Van Dyke and Garcia here, and then it's been Van Dyke. Van Dyke's had some poor first halves. Let's go back and look at the Virginia and North Carolina games. They trailed Virginia with 119 yards at the first half. They trailed North Carolina with 80 yards at the first half. Then he had big second halves in both games. Finished the Virginia game with 372. Finished the North Carolina game with 421. Now he just plays complete games. 202 yards at the half, 319 yards at the half. I think we've seen a quarterback come to fruition. Of course, it says in the magazine, go ahead and read the quarterback write-up. I was impressed with both Van Dyke and Garcia in the spring game and said even if King doesn't play, I like their quarterback situation, and Van Dyke hasn't let me down. Well, anyway, they're at home. They are playing Georgia Tech this week, and we're going to put Georgia Tech on the left and Miami on the right. Now, Miami started out the year 2-4 here, but the Virginia game, if you watched it or don't know what happened at the end of this game, Miami missed a field goal. They missed a field goal on the final play of the game. Had that field goal gone through the uprights, they would have been 3-2, but instead they lost the game. One play away from being 3-2. And then North Carolina, let's go take a look at the North Carolina game. I could explain it to you, but why not show it to you? Take you all the way down to the end of the game. Now, the previous week, Miami, they blamed Diaz for settling for a field goal and then missing it. So here they have a first, they're down at the North Carolina 16-yard line. They could take a field goal and tie the game and send it to overtime. But after all that criticism the previous week, he's figuring, you know what, let's go win the game. Van Dyke throws a pass. It is tipped and intercepted. This shows you, broken up by Gemmel. And then it was intercepted by Gray on a tip pass at the 19-yard line. Miami was about to score, about to beat North Carolina. So here, one play away from a win, one play away from a win. They could have been 4-2. Instead, they were 2-4, and everybody's calling for Manny Diaz's head. Well, what's happened, they beat the NC State, they beat Pitt. I love the way they're playing. They're in good current form. When you look at Georgia Tech and look at their season, first of all, if we go back to that pass defense ranking, I'm not going to show it to you here. It would take up too much time, but they are number 117 in the pass defense ranking. So Tyler Van Dyke should have a good game here. And also Georgia Tech, they did have a really good game here. Now the Clemson game they were down, I believe it was 14-3, 14-2, or 14-5. They kick a field goal, recover the onside kick, drive down, almost pulled the upset. The next week they beat North Carolina. But since then, they got blown out by Pitt. The Virginia game, they trailed by 3 touchdowns. The Virginia Tech game last week, they're outgained by 125 yards, lost by 9. And they only got past Duke by 4, so they have not played good. And how this was reflected down here. And I want you guys to use this down here each week. It's the last 4 weeks. So as you can tell, they are not in good current form down here. Miami of Florida is in good current form. They could easily be 4-0 in this stretch. Georgia Tech could easily be 0-4. The Duke game, they won by 4, and you're thinking, okay, will they let them back in? No, look right here. Georgia Tech scores with 51 seconds left to pull out the 31-27 win. They trailed 27-24. So you have a team that could easily be 0-4, and it's reflected in the average game grades. The average game grades show Georgia Tech at 91.4 the last 4 weeks. 97 for the season, but 91.4. And remember, here's how the average game grades work. They don't care about Georgia Tech at all. All they care about is what kind of yards did you put up offensively, what kind of yards did you allow defensively, what was the points you allowed and scored, and who was your opponent, and where was the game played. That's all that matters. It has no knowledge of Georgia Tech. It's only about what they do on the field. And so Georgia Tech has played to a 91.4 level. Miami, which could be 4-0, has played to a 105.8 level. That is 14.4 difference. Factor in the home field edge. You got Miami by 18.8 this week, and Miami just delivered that best bet winner for me last week. So last 4-week play of the week, Miami's minus 10.5, and the last 4 weeks says they're 18.9 points better, maybe even better than that. We got a team in great current form. Let's take Miami of Florida, minus 10.5. Now, for this next team, you guys are very familiar with them because I've been using them on the Phil Steele Plus tour with selections, and then even last week used them on Inside the Press Box for a selection. We're going to take a look at the Purdue-Michigan State game. Now, remember, a few weeks back when Purdue went into Iowa, I had Purdue here on the Phil Steele Plus tour, and I pointed out the fact that I thought Wisconsin would win the West, but called for the upset, and Purdue upset number 2 ranked Iowa. They are a giant killer, and they didn't just upset Iowa, they dominated the game. They had a 464 to 271 yard edge. Well, the next week, right here on the Phil Steele Plus tour with selections, I gave you Wisconsin, saying Purdue's off a big win. Wisconsin's going to win the Big Ten West, and look what happens. Purdue lost 30 to 13. They were outgained 342 to 206. We'll talk about Wisconsin's defense a little later today. Then last week, I used Purdue as an inside the press box play, and they were against Nebraska, delivered the outright upset, 28 to 23, and looked good doing it. They had a 24 to 19 first down edge. A couple things I want to point out about Michigan State. Michigan State, when they played Nebraska, was out first down 26 to 12. Outgained 440 to 254. At the half, they were down 13-10. It was 20 to 10, I believe, when they got a punt return for a touchdown. They ended up pulling out the win in overtime. Then you look at the Indiana game. Indiana's been struggling this year, but Indiana had a 23 to 13 first down edge, 322 to 241 yard edge. Could easily have lost to Indiana. And then last week, they trailed Michigan 30 to 14. They needed 2 fourth down conversions, 2 two-point conversions to get back and tie the game. They needed a fumble return for a touchdown, which was a touchdown for Michigan, taken away by replay review. They got outgained 552 to 395, but somehow they come in with the win. So this is a fairly fortunate Michigan State team that somehow, some ways got to 8-0, and they're right up there. And all this week, they're celebrating the win over Michigan. They're pointing at the standings. Where do we rank? Can we make the playoff? Where are we at? They're all watching the Tuesday show. And what we find this time of year, and it's one of my handicapping things that I've used here on the Phil Steele Plus tour before, is the teams that are battling for the playoff spot are watching the rankings. They may say, no, we're not paying attention to the rankings. These are college kids. They're paying attention to the rankings. There's conversation. Where do we rank? How do we do? What do we have to do to make the playoff? Michigan State's into that atmosphere right now. And what I found is that play against those teams this time of year. Now, if you're a team that controls your own destiny, then you don't worry about it. But, Michigan State's a team that's new to all this, so they're pretty excited that they're in the rankings. So I've had a great pulse on Purdue, as mentioned, what they've been doing on. Go back in another misleading game. How about this Minnesota game? They lost to Minnesota. They had a 28 to 12 first down edge, a 448 to 294 yard edge. How about that? And yet they lost that game. So you've got misleading games for Michigan State, misleading games against Purdue. That's why Michigan State is got the record they do and where they are. Now, if you're a fantasy football player, I'm going to tell you this. See this guy here, David Bell? Take him and plant him on your fantasy football team this week. He had 121 against Connecticut, 120 against Minnesota. He missed the Illinois game, 240 against Iowa. These past 2 weeks, not as much. Teams are concentrating on them. Michigan State can concentrate all they want. They can't stop the pass. They took on a passing team in Miami. That was what De'Ara King gave up 388 yards. They gave up 488 yards to Western Kentucky. Now, Rutgers can't pass the ball. Indiana's quarterbacks are banged up. Now they take on a Michigan team that doesn't really pass much. They give up 406 yards. 301 yards per game they're giving up through the air. Take David Bell, plant him on your fantasy football team. He's going to have an exceptional day receiving this week. Now the final factor here, we're going to take a look at the average game grade. Purdue comes in with an average game grade of 109.2. And even with Michigan State beating Michigan last week, they're playing at 105.9 and 106.5 the last 4 weeks. Purdue's at 112.2 the last 4 weeks. Better average game grade by 4 points here, by 6 points here. Then add in the home field edge. That's saying Purdue by 7, Purdue by 10, and they're the underdog. They're getting 3 points this week. I like Purdue +3 over Michigan State. We are going to have a halftime break, and at the halftime break, I'm going to give you that special just for you guys, just for you Phil Steele Plus members. And I'll have that in a minute, but we're going to review one more game here. It's a game I'm sure you guys have all been talking about at the water cooler, going over it every single day, wondering about all the specifics of this one. It's going to be Utah State at New Mexico State. Yeah, I know you've been talking about it all week long. This is a New Mexico State that I'm going to tell you a couple things about New Mexico State. They are flying under the radar. First of all, thanks to Todd last week for putting up those ATS logs for me. If you go to FBS Info, come over here and click on College ATS logs. Click on College logs here. This gives you the spread on every game, the total on every game for this year. The W doesn't mean if they won the game or lost the game straight up. It's against the spread. This allows you, you know how I like streaks. This allows you to pick out streaks at a glance. Well, let's go find New Mexico State here. And you probably haven't watched a single New Mexico State game this year, have you? Well, guess what? They lost to UTEP at the start 30-3. They're at 1-17, but this is what I like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 2 against the spread. And look at the teams they're playing. Mountain West, they win. Mountain West, they did lose to Hawaii. Hawaii got a late touchdown. They lost by 20, getting 17, but they didn't trail until very late in the game. San Jose, Mountain West team, cover. Nevada, Mountain West team, cover. Hawaii, Mountain West team, cover. They are 5-1 against the Mountain West this year. I like that. So they might as well be a Mountain West team. They'd be at the bottom of the Mountain West right now, but they're playing well. And you probably don't know anything about them. So let's learn a little bit about New Mexico State. Become an instant expert. Who's their quarterback? It's Jonah Johnson. And Jonah Johnson having a pretty good year. He began the year as the starter, lost his job here, got injured, I should say. And then look at this, 280, 300, 425, 228. This dude can throw the football. Had struggled a little bit against Hawaii in the last game, but he had a 6-1 ratio the previous two games against San Jose, against Nevada, the two teams we profiled a little bit earlier. So they do have the pass attack going for him. Isaiah Garcia Castenda is having a good season, 462 yards. Jarrett Wyatt there. There you go. You're an instant expert on New Mexico. Yeah, their defense is weak. What do you expect for a 1-17? But they are getting 18.5 points here. So they're a very quiet 6-2 against the spread. They're 5-1 as a double-digit dog. And look at this. They're off a bye. They had a bye. They played Hawaii. They gave them a good game. They only lost 48-34. And they had another bye. You talk about a team that's fresh and ready, and oh my, you have Alabama and Kentucky on deck. If you're going to get a win in the next 3 weeks, you're not going to beat Alabama or Kentucky. You need to beat Utah State. So I think we're going to see an A game out of New Mexico State. Now, meanwhile, you look at Utah State, and Utah State is having a better than expected year. Blake Anderson came over here, took over, brought his quarterback with him, Logan Bonner, and the pass offense. Look how they're doing. They are lighting it up. If we take a look here, you can see Logan Bonner has been throwing for a good amount of yards, coming off a 361-yard game against Hawaii. So he's doing extremely well. Now, they had a comeback win against Washington State. They actually trailed that game 23, I'm going to say 23-12, something like that. Let's take a look. It trailed the game 23-11. They got a touchdown with 5 minutes left, a touchdown with 11 seconds left to pull out the win. They got a comeback win against North Dakota. You can see here they trailed at the half. They got a comeback win against Air Force. Once again, if we click here and take a look, we see that they trailed 45-34. They get a touchdown with 9:51, 3:54 left. They get the comeback win again. Lost to Boise and BYU. Beat UNLV, but only by 4. And UNLV hasn't won a game this year. Beat Colorado State only by 2, and then had a big game against Hawaii. Now, what this does, if you take a look at their Mountain West games, they're 4-0. They are in the heat of the Mountain West race. Does this game mean anything? No. San Jose means everything. That's next week. Wyoming means everything. New Mexico. This team can win the Mountain West Conference. Do you even think this game is important? No. So you have most important game over here. You have least important game over here. You have a Utah State team that does well when trailing. They come back and win games. but now they're in the rare role of being a big favorite. They really haven't done that. Maybe the one game they've been a big favorite all year is UNLV. Let's go back to those spread logs and just see how many times Utah State's been a big favorite this year. Last year and the year before when they were struggling. Oops, I'm on the wrong thing here. Let's go to home page. Let's go to ATS logs and click on Utah State and see where they're at as a big favorite. Utah State's been an underdog, favored by 6, underdog, favored by 7, it didn't cover, underdog and favored by 5. First time all year, double-digit favorite in a game that's an extreme flat spot because they can win the Mountain West Conference. If they win their last 3 games, they are in the title game. I mean, they did lose to BYU, so they've got, or Boise, I should say. They've got 1 loss, but Boise's got multiple losses, so they control their own destiny. Meaningless game for a Utah State team, first time as a large favorite against a, in my mind, red-hot New Mexico State team that's 6-2 against the spread, that's very quietly under the radar. And then your final factor, let's look at the average game grades. You got a 99.7 to an 80. That means if you add in the home field edge here, that is saying Utah State should win the game only by 13.9, but the situation greatly favors New Mexico State. So we got a great situation, a red-hot underdog flying under the radar. I'm taking New Mexico State plus 18.5. Before I take my voice break here, I'm going to just let you know that I appreciate you guys watching this tape every week. And I've got a special for you. You get my Week 10 college press box. Now, it's got full write-ups on 61 games. There are some games that are already gone. I sent this out to you on the YouTube video earlier this week, but if you didn't watch it, it's $20 an issue. And it went 6-0 last week. I think it's something like 14-6 the last 4 weeks. A very poor start to the year, but heating up, just like last year. Last year, very poor start to the year, then really heated up down the stretch. It's $20 an issue. This week's issue price is $20. But for you guys, just $5. All you have to do is go to the philsteele.com store, click on the store, and I'm going to put it over here. Go to the home page, click on the store, and once again, I'm not making any money on this. $5. Look at all you're getting like 60 pages of text and information, but I'm doing it because I value you guys as the Phil Steele Plus members. So go to Inside the Press Box. That's for the season. Let's see where the individual press box is. It's right here at the start. Here it is. Inside the press box, first one, $20. Click there. And when you click there, type in thanks plus 10 at the checkout. You get it for $5. So get all of this weekend's college football for $5 right here on and Inside the Press Box. I'm going to take a voice break. I'll be back. I've got FCS, more FBS, NFL, and a lot of quick hitters this week. So I'll be back with you very shortly. Let's get back to the tour, and I'm going to take you to an old friend, UMass. Yeah, UMass won for us with Boston College, Eastern Michigan. UMass did lose for us against Coastal Carolina and Toledo. But we bring UMass back up today because we're going to give you our FCS preview. Remember, for the FCS, I bring this up over here. Just go to FCS info and hit the team pages. You become an instant expert on any FCS team. So there's a lot of FCS games each week. You can play around. You can look them up. You can see what it's all about. And today we're going to take a look at Rhode Island. So when you click on Rhode Island, they're playing UMass. It's one of the main games this week. Now, the funny thing is, I see that Vegas has this up there, and they've got the game in red, meaning there's a question mark at quarterback. And I click on there for UMass, and they say that Tyler Little is questionable this week, so they've got the game in red. Tyler Little hasn't played since game 1, guys. Brady Olson's a starting quarterback for UMass. There's his stats across the board. So if Tyler Little doesn't play, guess what? It's going to be the same as it has been the last 6 weeks. But anyway, let's take a look at this matchup. Now, when you look at any FCS team, click up here, 2021 forecast. This gives you a complete write-up about the team. Tells you what happened to them. They made their first winning season in 17 years a couple years ago. A complete write-up on the offense, the defense, and then here's the wrap-up sentence down here. And they were projected 6th in the CAA. Once again, if you go here to these pages, this gives you the conference things at the beginning of the year. Who's favored by how much, preseason All-American, preseason All-Conference. It's all at your fingertips, every single team. let's get back to Rhode Island. And Rhode Island's a team that started out the season really strong. They opened up 5-0. Gotta love that. But what the last 3 games they've lost. And what happened was this competition stepped up. These teams that they played earlier were not great. They started playing some good teams. They had 162 yards offense here, 165 yards offense here, 298 yards offense here against Maine. They lost by 21 to Towson. They lost by 44 to Villanova. And they lost by 21 to Maine. So it's a team that's been struggling. Kasim Hill is the guy that used to play for Maryland. He had 4-13 for 22 yards against Villanova, 11-20 against Maine. And they started working in here. Brandon Robinson, as you see, 5-9, 6-10. They're starting to alternate quarterbacks a little bit, maybe losing a little faith in Kasim Hill. So what we look over here with UMass is at home, they did have solid covers against Boston College, Eastern Michigan. But look at the opponents. Bryant, Albany, Brown, Stony Brook, Delaware, Towson, Villanova, Maine, Pittsburgh, Boston College, Eastern Michigan, Coastal Carolina, Toledo. They stepped down in class and played Connecticut, and guess what? They beat them 27-13. I think Connecticut's a better team than Rhode Island. They lost to Florida State. They lost to Liberty and Malik Willis. So they've been playing some big-time teams and losing their games. They only have 1 win all year, but as you could tell, they've been taking on much tougher competition. So now let's take a look at the average game grade. These guys are playing to an average game grade on the season of 62.1. UMass is at 72.9. The thing that strikes me funny in this game, UMass is only a 2-point favorite. All right, they should be much more than a 2-point favorite in this game. And let's look at the last 3 weeks. Now, in the last 3 weeks, UMass has lost 2 games, both by big margins. Liberty and Florida State, and they also beat Connecticut. So in the last 3 weeks, I should say, they're playing to an average game grade of 70.8. If you take these 3 numbers here, 82, 62, 67 divided by 3, you get 70.8. The last 3 weeks, Rhode Island is playing to an average game grade of 47.1. That is a 23.7 point difference. Factor in the home field edge. That says UMass by 26.7. Very surprised the number on this is -2. The total on the game is 57. So you do have a 5-3 Rhode Island. You do have a 1-7 UMass, but UMass is a much better team. They do have Maine on deck, which should be another win for them. They have Army and New Mexico State. They may win some games down the stretch, but it all starts here. And coming off games against Malik Willis and Florida State, a hungry Florida State team, I look for UMass to get the win this week. We're going to take UMass -2. I know I promised I wouldn't be bringing UMass back on, but I brought them on anyway, just because the line value's there. Now, last night, and I told you we went 2-0 on the FCS last week here on the tour. I go into my computer, and I've got 8 different sets of power ratings, and I factor them in against the line. I say, give me the best chances. And then I look at the 10 games that are towards the top. I'm only using 1 FCS game this week, but I do want to show you some stuff I uncovered last night. The first one we take a look at, Presbyterian is taking on Valparaiso. And like I said, you become an instant expert on these teams. I became an instant expert on them last night, just looking this stuff up. So you go there, we're going to click on FCS here, Valparaiso. And here's what I found interesting on this. First of all, Valparaiso, and I went and double-checked the stats. I thought our stat guy typed something in wrong. Had 51 yards offense and 3 first downs last week against San Diego. They have won a couple of games this year. They're laying 19 points with an offense that had 51 yards last week. That's pretty surprising. And the interesting thing I found out about Presbyterian last night, I click on the forecast, and we see that their head coach is Kevin Kelly. Now, who's Kevin Kelly? Well, he's the guy that's been the head coach at Pulaski Academy in Arkansas and gained fame for his unconventional strategy of never punting and almost always electing for onside kicks. He won 9 state titles in Arkansas. And I went back and looked at the play-by-play. He does have a couple of punts in here, but he usually goes for it on 4th and 4 at his own 27, and that's the reason they're losing big to some of these better teams. But here they're not taking on a better team, so maybe the strategy works for him this week. A quick hitter there would be that I am leaning towards Presbyterian, especially against a team that had just 51 yards offense last week. And speaking of offense, this one surprised me. I'm going to take a look at we're going to look at Fordham over here. And let me look at Fordham real quick. Fordham, click here. And the interesting thing to me in this one, we're going to put Lehigh on the other side. Lehigh's not playing Fordham this week, but I found this interesting. Look at Lehigh's offense. 139, 224, 141, 101, 146, 119, 122. These guys can't even top 200 yards in a game. 577 yards against Fordham. I'm scratching my head. And Fordham's a good team. They're 5-3. But their defense, look at this. They do give opponents a lot more yards. 155 yards per game above their season average. 128. I'm just this 577 stood out to me. It's almost impossible. That's about as much as they gain in 5 games. They got in 1 game against Fordham. I'd be wondering about Fordham's defense. So if you're thinking about playing Fordham the rest of the year, think high scoring, because this defense, that 577 appears like normal, but it came from a team that's averaging 100 points per game. I just found those things interesting last night when I was looking at the FCS. All right, let's get back to the FBS. I've got another FBS game for you. I've got quick hitters, and then we're going to take a dip into the NFL, which won for you last week. We're going to start off with Iowa against Northwestern. Now, those are team pages there. We're going to click here on team pages. Northwestern's the home team. I'm going to put them on the right. And Iowa is the road team. I'm going to put them on the left. So I was hearing a couple of national commentators say, well, Iowa's just not that good. We saw that the last 2 weeks. They were overrated. They're not that good. I do think they're pretty good. They ran into a Purdue team in a letdown spot after beating Penn State. And then last week they ran into a Wisconsin team. And I'm going to talk about Wisconsin's defense in a minute. I keep alluding to it. We'll get to it. But as Coach Ferentz said in the post-game conference after it, if Wisconsin gets ahead of you, that's their game. Once they get ahead, they can put you to sleep because they run the football and you can't score on their defense. So I do think they're a good team. They're coming off 2 tough games. Wisconsin's a very good team, and they were in a letdown situation. Plus, they had to play the Badgers on the road. Now, if you're looking for another fantasy football player, I'm saying take Tyler Goodson. You look here, Iowa hasn't had a great run game this year, but they did run for 206 yards against Kent State. Look at Northwestern's run defense. They're struggling. They were in a good spot here against Rutgers. I believe they were off a bye. Rutgers was off a lot of big games, and they took advantage of it. But other than that, they're giving up a lot of yards. 427 on the ground to Nebraska, 294 to Michigan, 308 to Minnesota. In Big Ten play, they're giving up 284 yards, 6.1 yards per carry. Guys, if you get 6.1 yards per carry, why pass? But if you do pass, they're giving up 66% completions. Northwestern's defense, not good. Iowa needs some offense. This is your elixir. And I believe they do pretty well in this series. Let's go take a look at it. Nope, they've been struggling against Northwestern. They did win the last time they came here, 20-0. But look at this. The home team has lost 5 of the last 6 straight up. And look at all the upsets. But the upsets don't apply here. But the home team has struggled. The unders have come in pretty well here. But I think we do have a weak defense over here for Northwestern. For Iowa, they've taken on the much tougher schedule. Number 5 against number 59. And they're also playing with revenge. You go back and look at last year. If we take a look at the box score in this game, Northwestern and Iowa from last year, you could see that Iowa led this thing 17-0. They're going to win the game. Guess what? They ended up losing 21-20. It cost them the Big Ten West championship. Had they won that game, they would have been there. They would have only lost 1 game all year to Purdue and had the head-to-head over Northwestern. They won their next 6 games that year in dominating fashion. They would have won their last 8 had they got to play Michigan and Missouri. And then they opened this year with winning 6 in a row. So they had run 12 in a row prior to those 2 losses. They're a good team. They're playing with legitimate revenge. And then we just take a look at the average game grade. They're playing to 107.4. They're playing to an 89.1. Once again, it has nothing to do with Iowa's beginning grade, Northwestern's beginning grade, only what you do in the games. That right there says Iowa wins this game by 18.3 points. Iowa does great, by the way, as an away favorite. Go ahead and look in your magazine. Check out Iowa. We've got all the spread numbers in there. Put your finger on away favorite. Count them up. Iowa is 20-5 as an away favorite. They were an away favorite here against Maryland this year. Here they were a dog against Iowa State. Here they were a dog against Wisconsin. Favorite against Maryland, they win 51-14. So you got a really good away favorite, 20-5 against the spread. You got, I think, a complete different class of teams here playing with legitimate revenge. I like Iowa minus the 12. Let's get to those quick hitters I promised, all college football. First of all, I can't do a Phil Steele Plus tour without talking about Missouri, can I? You guys all know about them. Just for you fans of Missouri, and I'm sure there are quite a few of you who are watching Missouri games on a weekly basis. I had mentioned that they had lost 8 in a row against the spread. We'll make it 9 in a row against North Texas, make it 10 in a row against Texas A&M, make it 11 in a row against Vanderbilt. All is Phil Steele Plus picks. You got to keep playing against Missouri. Now, the spread's really high here, 38 points. Vegas is begging you to put some money on Missouri, but what I say about streaks, you can win many times, you lose only once. So remember, keep playing against Missouri until they actually cover a game. Now, I've been talking about Wisconsin. I'm going to talk about their defense for a minute. I'm going to put Georgia over here on the left. No, they're not playing Georgia this week, but I just want to show you something. Everybody's talking about how dominating Georgia's defense is, and it is, no doubt about it. They're the number one team in the country. They have a great defense. Let's look at Wisconsin's defense. Georgia's allowing 227 yards per game. Wisconsin's allowing 215, even better than what Georgia's allowing. And they have played Penn State, Notre Dame, Michigan. They've played some pretty good teams. They played Iowa. They played Purdue. They've played Clemson. They played Auburn. They played Florida. You'd argue Wisconsin's played a tougher schedule. Over here, what do they do against opponent averages? Wisconsin is 182 yards per game below. They're 182 yards per game below. Now, they're number one in the country. They're number two in that category. It must be a decimal point. It must be something like 182.4 versus 182.3. And as you could tell, yardage are even. These two teams are exactly even. I guess it's pretty doggone even. They're almost identical. It must be splitting hairs in that particular aspect. So this is a very good Wisconsin defense. I told you back when they played Purdue, they were down in the standings. They were 3-3, and there was 3 teams with just one loss in the West, and Wisconsin was going to win the West. I still stand by that. I still think Wisconsin wins the West this year. So keep your eyes on these Badgers. They have an excellent defense. They're playing Rutgers this week, by the way, and I do think their defense shuts them down. So I like Wisconsin in that game. Pitt. Let's take a look at Pitt against Duke. And here's the thing I like about this game. Pitt's coming off a loss, and the last couple times they've come off a loss, it has been pretty good for Pitt. They lost here to Western Michigan. They won 77-7. Here they lost to Clemson. They beat Georgia Tech. Here they lost to Notre Dame. They beat Florida State. So they're good off a loss. I expect them to win some games. They still control their destiny. If they beat North Carolina, Virginia, and Syracuse, they win the division. They can even afford to slip up to a North Carolina or Syracuse and still win the division as long as they win the head-to-head against Virginia. And then if you take a look at the series here, click on the series, we see that Pitt is 5-0 straight up, 5-0 against the spread versus Duke. So they do extremely well in the series, 5-0 straight up and ATS in the series. And they are 12-4 ATS as an away favorite. So far this year as an away favorite, they played Georgia Tech and beat them by 31. They played Virginia Tech and beat them by 21. And they beat Tennessee by 7, covering all 3 of those games. And Duke's D at the end of the year is something I want to point out. Look at Duke's defense the last 4 weeks of the year. They're doing okay? Oh, my goodness. They're doing okay? Oh, my goodness. Look at those red numbers at the end of the year. Duke's defense wears down, and all of a sudden they're a play-against team at the end of the year. That's a lot of red numbers at the end of the year. And there's a stark difference from the start of the year at Duke. Look at that. No red numbers, all red numbers. No red numbers except one, all red numbers. So if that happens again right here, and they started with the red numbers last week, you may just see Duke start to slide at the end of the year like they have the last 3 years. So keep in mind, we may be looking at that next week again. Who's Duke playing next week? Duke is playing at Virginia Tech. If we get red numbers in here again for Duke, it may be that typical end-of-the-year slide for Duke. And let's take a look at one more quick hitter. We're going to look at Navy and Notre Dame this week. Notre Dame's at home, playing great, by the way. In fact, look at this. Excuse me. If you go to the homepage, go to FBS Info, look at the strength of wins, pain of losses. Now, what this does If you beat a team, you get credit for every FBS win. If they beat an FCS team, you don't get credit for that. If that team beat an FBS team, you get credit for their wins. Georgia's number 1 at 31. Notre Dame is number 2 at 27. Michigan, 25. And so on down the line. Now, with this game, I actually, even though I like Notre Dame overall like that, I'm leaning with Navy plus the points in this one because let's take a look at the series history for starters. We'll click on Notre Dame Navy, and we see that while Navy has lost these games, a lot of games, they tend to do well against the spread. They're 5-2 against the spread here, and I believe they do well at Notre Dame. There's a win, there's a loss, there's a win. They do well at Notre Dame. Here's a cover, there's a loss, there's a cover. There's a loss last year, but it was only 7.5 last year. Navy's 5-2 ATS against Notre Dame the last 6, and also let's take a look at Notre Dame. Let's go back to those logs I talked about, and if we go to FBS info and we go to college ATS logs, Navy comes in here just 2-6 on the year, so you think they're doing pretty bad, but once again, there's bad on the scoreboard. And then there's what some of us care about a lot, which is against the spread. Navy is 5-1 against the spread. They stayed within 8 of Houston. They upset UCF. They stayed within 7 of SMU. They did lose to Memphis. That was a game where Memphis used a lot of big plays. They stayed within 7 of Cincinnati, and they upset Tulsa. 5-1 against the spread their last 6 games. Navy's defense. You know their offense shrinks the clock with that option. Look at this defense. That's a lot of green. They are holding opponents to 105 yards per game below their season average. That's the 6th best defense in the country. Did you know that? Navy defense? Usually don't equate the two. Those are your quick hitters for the week. All right, let's turn our attention to one NFL game this week. And once again, just go to your NFL team pages right here. NFL team page, NFL team page. I like the logos, like to set it up like that. By the way, our NFL guy, Sean, doing very well for the Inside the Press Box. Todd's going to update me with the Inside the Press Box record in a minute. But for the NFL, it's doing extremely well. 2-0 again last week. I believe that makes it, I'm going to guess 11-5 now on the season, but Todd's going to tell me in a minute. It is 11-5 on the season for the NFL. So I don't do the NFL write-ups. I got to be honest with you guys. Sundays when the games are going on, I'm watching college football games. I'm going through play-by-plays. I am just studying up on college football. That's all I concentrate on. I will watch the ESPN wrap-up show on Sunday morning to see how or on Monday morning to see how the NFL teams did, so I can sort of keep pulse of them. Naturally, I have knowledge of the NFL. I have knowledge of all the players. They all played college. I have followed the NFL in years past, but I'm not writing it for Press Box. But if you're reading the write-ups in Press Box and getting the best bets, 11-5 on the year. So congratulations, Sean. You're doing a hell of a job with the NFL this year. But here's my look-up for a game. I usually glance at the games, see what's out there. I'm going to take a look at the Chargers are taking on Philadelphia this week. And here's one thing that jumped out at me. When you go to the homepage, I just showed you the strength of wins, pain of losses. This one's pretty interesting. If we go to strength of wins, pain of losses, which Todd puts up like every Tuesday or Wednesday. Once again, in the NFL, now it's not like the FBS where you discount FCS wins. Basically, if you beat a team, you get credit for their wins. If you lose to a team, you get credit for their losses. So if you do it that way, who's the best team in the NFL right now? Arizona's 25-1. The Rams are 18-1. Green Bay is 24-2. Look at Dallas, 20-2. Tampa Bay, 20-3. I can go all the way down the line, but this is invaluable as it shows you get credit for the teams you beat, wins, and you get credit for the teams you lose to, losses. Naturally, Detroit at the bottom at 0-25. Jacksonville, who we talked about last week, just 1-22. So let's find Philadelphia. Philadelphia is 7-13, so they have beat teams that have won 7 games this year. They have lost to teams that have lost 13 games this year. That's a 35% record. Now let's go find the Chargers. The Chargers have beat teams that have won 15 games this year. They have lost to teams that have only lost 7 games this year. Dallas, Baltimore, New England combined have lost 7 games. They are a 15-7 team in this record. 68%. So right there, that tells you while the records are fairly close, the Chargers are 5-3 on the year. And let's go to the NFL here and take Philadelphia and see what Philadelphia's record is this year. Philadelphia is 3-5. It's an even bigger difference when you look at who they beat and who they lost to. Now you've got the Chargers off of 2 losses, so they need to win a game. They've already proven they can win on the road. They went into the NFC East and beat Washington, a game they had a 424, 259-yard edge. And they also beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead. So this is a very good Chargers team, off 2 losses, in need of a win, and they're taking on Philadelphia. Philadelphia this year has lost to San Francisco at home by 6. They lost to Kansas City at home by 12. They lost to Tampa at home by 6. So they've yet to win a home game. They've been sort of unimpressive, as you saw by the wins and losses. And this is a team, so the strength of wins and losses has it 15-7 to 7-13. You got a team off of 2 losses versus a team off a very impressive win, 44-6. And that's why the number's where it is on this game. The Chargers are only -1.5. They're not even laying a field goal here. So it's a win situation. Now you're thinking, okay, well, they're going into chilly Philadelphia, right? Well, I did check the weather last night. 56 degrees at game time. These are grown men. 56 degrees is not cold. They are going to go out and play a regular game against Philadelphia in a must-win situation with a much better team. Seems obvious to me. I'm going to go with the Chargers, -1.5 over Philadelphia. And one more quick hitter for you, and it's from the NFL, and it's something you might find fascinating. And this goes all the way back. I've been handicapping for a long time, guys, since I was a lad. And there was a game, though, when I had started, I had a sports service back in the 80s. And in the 80s, there was a Monday night game, and it was Buffalo against the Rams. And the Rams were 5-0, and the Bills had Jim Kelly. But guess what? Jim Kelly ruled out of the game. Spread through the roof. Went up to about 7, 8. It was double digits, I believe, because you can't beat the Rams. And now, no Jim Kelly for Buffalo. Buffalo's 3-2 to begin with. And I used it then, Buffalo, to win the game. And they did. They won the game outright. And now I have called it since 1989, the quarterback injury system. And what happens is when a major player goes out of a game, 3 things happen. First of all, the spread moves drastically. And we see that in the Kansas City-Green Bay game. Kansas City was actually about a 2-point favorite to open. They are now, and then it went down to pick 'em. For a while because the Packers are playing so well. Now Kansas City's a 7.5-point favorite. So the game is swung in that respect. Another thing that happens is one team lets down a little because you're not taking on the top player. And the rest of that team, the Green Bay in this example, are all going to band together and say, we're not just one player, we're a team. And I've seen it work so many times. So I thought I'd throw that out to you. If it works this week with Green Bay, we'll use it in future weeks again. But I've been using this for about 30 years now. It's called the quarterback injury system. Play on the team that loses that star player. You get a lot of line value. Well, that'll do it for this week's Phil Steele Plus. I want to remind you, get that inside the press box if you want for just $5 this week. My way of saying thank you for taking the Phil Steele Plus tour. And I'll be back with you next week. Let's hope we have another strong week here on the Phil Steele Plus tour.